I was watching a video on the Rising Tide Foundation, the channel I've mentioned before, that analytically and philosophically deconstructs history and literature. So, in this video in particular, it talks about a book by C.S. Lewis, which is called Out of the Silent Planet, and it's about. I want to read it at some point. It looks amazing. It's about this. The protagonist, gets abducted by this group of strangers. You don't know. I don't even know at this stage, because I haven't read it, whether they're human or not, or they're astronauts who are studying this other planet. But they end up bringing him to this other planet. And however, it is very clear that most of this planet that he ends up on is populated by, of course, extraterrestrial creatures, right? The identity of the strangers is uncertain. But the creatures are sort of these humanoid, almost like, I remember in some of the pictures of them, they look like otters, kind of, but they're more human, they're furry, and in a place where all the water is warm. It's actually a beautiful place, very thin mountains. And according to I think Cynthia Chung, actually, I think is her name, and she often will speak on this channel. She shows that C.S. Lewis was trying to counteract, or use this sort of literature, this kind of story, to counteract H.G. Wells's views about the universe, that nothing has any meaning or purpose, or if there is a purpose, it's outside of our understanding of anything that we can really control, right? That everything is purely just mechanistic, right? If you want to call that a purpose at all. And things can only be understood in a mathematical sense, which really highlights many of the other things that I've mentioned about certain kinds of literature that always seem a little suspicious, a little propagandistic, and but I think one of the things that this was interesting to me was that I think H.G. Wells's perspective perhaps has seeped into pop culture and literature a lot more than maybe people think, and maybe on a subconscious level, because like, for example, if there were a book published about, let's say, an outcast, like a social outcast, somebody who was alienated because they were actually fighting for a certain cause, like something that was very noble, heroic. Let's say they believed in something really strongly, but then they end up getting taken down by the establishment, right? That story might be admired, it might be respected, but it will not get as much traction, not as many sales, I imagine, or not as much love or adoration as a story about someone who's alienated, an outcast, because they simply think that life has no meaning and no purpose, and they're rejecting the moral norms of the society around them, right? That there's a kind of a allure to that, sort of the taboo, that kind of darkness. But I think perhaps psychologically it's debatable whether that's really healthy or not, but it's and I think that even on a personal level I struggle with this, because when I worked for many years on my own book series, the protagonist who's fighting against this sort of dystopian aristocracy in the United States, his name is Dmitry Sokolov. He in this sort of fictional science fiction series that's probably going to be a trilogy, he is definitely more the traditionally heroic type, even though he ends up being the outcast, right? He's fighting for a certain cause, but I think I always felt that there was something missing, there was something off, because subconsciously I think I've been always given the sensation that or the feeling that someone who's cast out of society in a novel, in order to have the kind of allure, the kind of sort of seductive quality for many readers, that it has to have really more of a rejection of any kind of moral system, right? That there has to be a kind of a state of being, I think, that's rebellious in a different way, or state of mind, that is, But over the years, I kind of got over that. I realized, okay, there's a way to make this work. This is actually this is something more new. This is something that might revive certain things that are older but are more interesting, and I think one of the ways that I dealt with that is that in addition to having heroism and lofty aspirations, that combining in humor, or trying to, or at least what I'm trying to do, is understand things like I was talking about yesterday in books like Alice in Wonderland or Kafka's novels, right? There's a combination. It has all these different elements, like many of the European writers have a knack for doing, right? And sort of combining the humorous with the tragic, with the wonderful, etc. And that way, I kind of felt like I can kind of get myself to feel like I wasn't taking myself too seriously, and all of the heroic feats and all of the things that I think that the writer or the character was trying to accomplish.